Welcome to the Sports Card Talk Show. Sports Card Talk Show with Kevin Anderson and Lauren Walker, the Skol Brothers.
Welcome to episode 84 of the Sports Card Talk Show. We got some Monday Mount Rushmore going on today. Who do we got?
We're getting Washington Redskins done tonight, and Tim at CopCards31 on Instagram is going to help us out with that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. We've been looking for somebody, and actually we ran into Burke Knowledge on our live, and he's like, I think I might have somebody.
Yeah.
And got us in contact with him, so it's awesome, man. And yeah, I think it's going to be our first guest from Canada.
Oh, yeah, he's from Canada.
Yeah, awesome. So should we dial him up?
Yeah.
All right.
Ring-a-ling-ding-dong.
All right, we got Tim on the line. Thanks for joining us and helping us out with Redskins Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very honored, guys, to be on the talk show today.
Awesome. We have quite a list, so we're curious to see how you whittled it down a little bit. They got pretty good history there.
Yeah, and definitely I can confirm that. And me being kind of a newer fan as of 2010, there's a lot of names about, including the face of the franchise. 8 of the 9 guys I've actually never seen play. So there's a lot of research, a lot of fun watching videos, and I want to say it made me more of a Redskins fan because of it. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's what we've have found to be the most enjoyable about doing this series is digging into the history of every team and finding out like some of the names you've heard of, but you honestly don't know what teams they played for. Some of the old guys, you know. Absolutely,
yeah. But yeah, no, before I jump into it, I want to give a shout out to some fellow Redskins card collectors, Sports Cards 365, good friend, Dak Sports Cards, and RJ Cards 88, all Redskins fans. So I'm representing you guys too, though.
Oh, cool.
Oh, nice, man.
And just shout out to Burke's Knowledge as well, who recommended me to come on the channel. So thanks to him too.
Yeah, that was awesome. He mentioned that I might know somebody, and then next thing you know, we're messaging. So that's really cool. The community's awesome, man. I gotta say it's amazing.
And it's been a lot of fun. I've been welcomed into the community. And before I started off, I know I can't have as nice of a beard as you though, Lauren, but I'm trying hard.
You got it. Yours is much more full. Mine's kind of I got the Fu Manchu kind of skinny thing going on.
Fun. Well, should we?
I got you, but I'll just jump right into it. And
yeah,
first got my honorable mentions, so I'll go from 4 to 1 honorable mentions, and then 4 to 1 in the Mount Rushmore, and then the face of the franchise. So on the 4th position, I have my guy right here, Trent Williams. Very lucky to have this painting, and it means it's very special to me. But so what can you say about Trent Williams? Nickname is the Silverback. He's a guy right now that's kind of been in the news for good reason, and the team has not rightfully, but has not treated him the way they really should have, as somebody who stayed loyal and honored the Redskins, really a true Redskins through and through. So he's the only person on my list that I've actually seen play live, and it was back in October 2018, and I know everybody will remember the game. That was the game that Drew Brees set the all-time passing record. And that was in New Orleans, so that was the only live game I've seen, but it was a lot of fun. And shout out to a couple buddies, Mike Grunts, Devin McIntyre, and Riggins Cards, all Saints fans. So Trent Williams, he was a last-minute switch into my honorable mentions, but really somebody who's deservedly to be there. So he's drafted 4th overall by the Redskins back in 2010, and he's been with the team since, really the epitome of loyalty. So he's never missed one game. He did only miss one game in his rookie season, aside from the last about year and a half where he's been away due to injury. But a guy who just who has loved the Redskins up until they didn't treat him properly. But I'm not holding. I'm holding out faith that we can mend the fences there. But so he's famously played with Adrian Peterson, at the Oklahoma Sooners, somebody who I know you guys will have on your Mount Rushmore. Probably close to the top, I'd say. But so it's really special that he played with him in college, and they played again in Washington. But a guy who's been to countless Pro Bowls, and and he's been to countless Pro Bowls. He's regarded by his fellow players as one of the best left tackles in the league. Somebody that when you're a defensive end lining up against him, you don't want to do it because he'll put his hands all over you. He's agile as heck. And when he's coming around the corner pulling and you're a defensive back and you're caught in the gap, it's not fun. He's going to put his hands on you and you will for sure hit the ground. And really one of my favorite Redskins players since he's, like I said, the only person on my list who I've seen played live. But really somebody who's very deservedly so. And he'll demolish guys with ease. And there's countless clips of it to show it.
Oh, yeah.
So next, moving on my list, Trent Williams was the current left tackle. Going back in history, we have Joe Jacoby, really a guy who I'm sure is on your list as well. I can see, Lauren, you're checking him off. But no, really a guy who is the epitome of what a left tackle is, but about 20 or 30 years back there. Even 40, because he was undrafted back in 1981, but he was somebody who played with the Redskins for his entire career, a true Redskin, if there was ever such an honor. He's regarded as one of the greatest Redskins players of all time to never make it into the Hall of Fame. It's very unfortunate, but within the last year or two, his eligibility ran out, so I'm sure he'll have that regard for the rest of his life. But any true Redskins fan and any true football fan knows that he's deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, and he's in there in our hearts.
There you go.
Hey,
but
the senior committee will have to put him in. I mean, he's though that the Redskins, the whole offensive line that the Redskins had in the 80s was absolutely amazing. Like, I've got all those guys on my list, to tell you the truth. Joe was my highest rank, though, for sure.
Mm-hmm. That actually goes in perfectly to what I wanted to say next was the Hogs. That's what they were famously named as, and there's a certain section of the stadium called the Hogettes, so it's guys that would obviously dress up in wigs and really epitomized the Hog name. So those guys, Russ Grimm, Jeff Bostic, two really huge stalwarts. Unfortunately, they didn't make my list, but if we could have a section for all the offensive linemen, they would be right there, and very deservedly so.
I think Dave Butts and Jim Leahy, I don't know how to pronounce that, Leahy, I don't know. Those guys were all part of those Hogs too.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys I'm going to mention later in my list have Joe Jacoby and Russ Grimm and Jeff Bostic and the guys you mentioned to thank, because they were the ones running behind them. They were the ones blocking for them. A really underappreciated group of guys, or position, the offensive line, but guys who, if you don't have that offensive line, you really don't have anything on offense. And that's held true to a lot of teams that we can see lately.
Yep.
Joe Jacoby, just finishing off, he's larger than life in stature. He's your prototypical left tackle warrior, a guy who played in all three Super Bowls, won all three Super Bowls, and started as left tackle in all the Super Bowls. So really a guy who any Redskins fan holds very dear to their heart. Rightfully so, as I said.
That there sounds like Hall of Fame credentials to me.
Maybe they got to get me on the committee explain it. I'd love that. That would be an honor too. So number 2 on my honorable mentions, Ken Houston. He widely regarded as one of the best safeties of all time. He was a Redskins safety from 1973 to 1980. 9th round pick, so talk about finding a gem in the later rounds. And just goes to show you the potential and greatness that could be hiding from guys who you wouldn't have necessarily seen right off the bat. 24 interceptions in 112 games, and was most definitely on pace to if he would have played as many games as him, to have got the interception title from Darryl Green, who later got it. Hall of Fame class 1986, played for the Houston Oilers, and then he later played for the Redskins. But in looking at the best safeties all the time in a couple lists, he was almost always in the top 3 or in the top 5. And 12 straight Pro Bowls from 1968 to 1979, 7 of those with the Redskins. So think about any player who makes 12 straight Pro Bowls. That's quite the feat. Mm-hmm. And there was a career-defining play that he had against the Cowboys in the first season, where he famously stopped legend Walt Garrison on 4th and 1. I saw a clip of it a couple days ago, and it was just something that really put a smile on my face. He's also super humble, a guy who never thought that he would get to the Hall of Fame. And even when he was nominated, he said, no, I think there's a lot of guys more deserving, but the other guys would have said he was the most deserving. So, right. Yeah. So moving on to my last honorable mention. This is a guy who I was really debating between putting him on the first honorable mention or the 4th Mount Rushmore. A lot of guys would have him higher, but I have John Riggins, the Diesel, the Maverick, another guy who's really kind of larger than life. He was drafted 6th overall by the Jets in 1971, but played from the Redskins from 76 to 79, and then 81 to 85. He's the Redskins' all-time rushing leader. Something that it'll take a really talented guy to overtake him as the rushing leader. Hall of Fame 1992. He's a 2-time rushing touchdown leader in 83 and 84 for the entire league. He's a 1-time Super Bowl winner and also won the MVP for that game too. A 1980s All-Decade team, and I could really go on and on, but like I said, a guy that's larger than life. He's a guy who had a huge afro at one point. He also had a mohawk, which was pretty neat, and a guy that definitely went against the system, and the system being Joe Gibbs, but Joe Gibbs loved him, and I'll actually share a pretty cool story in a little bit. But actually, and a really funny story about him that I came across. He was at a political function in Washington, and where the vice president was there, but there was also Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. And John Riggins had been having a couple beverages and leaned over to her and said, hey, loosen up, Sandra, baby. So that really made me laugh, and that was really summarizes him well. A guy who was a bruiser on the field, but just a jokester off of it. So, but like I said, he had a really hard running style. He ran downhill, and that old line really helped him a lot. But he was a guy who would break tackles. He wouldn't run around you. He'd run through you, and he'd be happy to do it. So looking at his tape, I really thought of like an old school Marshawn Lynch, a guy who just was a downhill runner before Marshawn Lynch became who he was. So he was famously, after he had left a couple seasons, he left, but he came back in 81. Joe Gibbs had went to his house to kind of recruit him back to the team, and it took some convincing, but he eventually came back for 81. One last thing he said before Joe Gibbs left: "Oh yeah, make sure not to trade me. I want the no trade clause in there." So that was pretty cool too. And famous play of his career was on 4th and 1 against the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. He bruised his way to a score, and then the Redskins eventually won that game 27-17. So that was pretty cool to see too. Heck yeah. So now, moving on to my Mount Rushmore, the bread and butter, and what really puts a smile on my face.
Awesome.
So I'll just preface this by saying I'm a defensive guy. I love defensive guys. So one guy, so Mount Rushmore number 4, Dexter Manley. He was the first. And I see Lauren smiling there because what a guy, right? He was a guy that I actually sadly had never known about before this, and I really should have, because as soon as I started to put on his Football Life documentary, I fell in love, and I'm going to be looking for some of his cards in the next little while. So he was a 5th round pick by the Redskins. 1981 to 1989, he was with the Redskins. 1986, he was an All-Pro with Pro Bowl honors. So he's the he's the single leading sack leader for the Redskins with 91. Ryan Kerrigan's hot on his tail with 90. So, but still, even if he does pass him, he'll still be regarded as one of the best defensive linemen and defensive players for the Redskins of all time. And another thing that I loved about him too is he hates the Cowboys just as much as us, or just as much as me. And that's just the rivalry that I'm sure you guys with the Bears or the Packers. It's just what it is. You got that one or two teams in the league where it's just head to head, and that's what it always is when you guys play. But the funny thing was that he played for Jimmy Johnson in college, so hates the Cowboys, but played for Jimmy Johnson. So I thought that was pretty cool too. He definitely did have. Oh, sorry.
His career must have almost been over by the time Jimmy was with the Cowboys.
Oh, I would think so too. I just watching a couple videos that just him talking about kind of the delinquent, let's say, that's Dexter Manley in university, or in college. It was pretty cool to see. So
like whenever I got into football had a lot of characters on the defensive side of the ball. You had Lawrence Taylor, you had Dexter, and they both were notoriously known for like their drug issues and stuff like that.
Oh, for sure.
But I remember like collecting his cards, and he's got like the mohawk going on, and just two guys that look like monsters on their football cards. So then and then you had Gastineau too with his brown long locks. I mean, these guys were all just
for the Jets, yeah,
characters at that time. But yeah, Dexter, I loved getting Dexter cards.
Me too, and I'm gonna try to find a couple. So, like you said, he did have character issues, and in his first offseason, Joe Gibbs wanted to make sure he was kind of taken care of. So they got him a job in the offseason as a deputy sheriff in Washington. So he was a full badge carrying officer, and imagine him pulling you over. That would be pretty funny. And I thought that was a really, really cool story. So like you said, he definitely had his troubles with drug issues, and sometimes people didn't know, but he was sounds like he was using drugs all the whole time. But that's really not what made him great. He did end up going to jail, but the circumstances that he overcame to kind of improve his life later on after he retired really shows the guy he is, and he's a really big family man. I watched some videos about him talking about his granddaughters or his kids, and he's got a heart of gold. It's just you had to dig and find it through that mean exterior, I guess you could say there. And he's comparable to a lot of prolific pass rushers these days, like even back then, Lawrence Taylor, but guys who could just rush the passer with ease: Khalil Mack, Von Miller, Aaron Donald. I know Aaron Donald works out of the middle, but it's guys who are just they were a force to be reckoned with on the D line, and you're happy to have them on your team, not happy to play against them.
Right.
Yeah.
So moving to the next guy, and really a guy that I know you'll have on your list of awesome, very, very cool guy, Art Monk, Mr. Redskin. He's played with the Redskins from 1980 to 1993. He's a 2008 Hall of Famer. He was drafted 18th overall by the Redskins in 1980. And he was a three-time Pro Bowler. He's the all-time Redskins reception leader. He's the all-time Redskins receiving leader, and the first receiver in NFL history at the time to reach 900 career receptions at a time when there was a lot of bruising running backs, but passing wasn't what it is today, where it's a passing game. It was much more of a running game back then, from what it seems like. Yeah. And 1984, he was all pro honors. He made the Pro Bowl. So that was probably the career, the season of his career. But he was a member of all three Redskins Super Bowl teams. So really a guy that you could rely on to stretch the field. But he was also a really interesting part of the posse. And the posse was Charles Taylor. It was himself, Gary Clark, and Ricky Sanders. Three really great receivers on one team. You just don't see it these days as much.
No, that was a really, really good receiving core that year. Mm-hmm. Those three guys.
Yeah, no, and even just he was the epitome of speed, agility, and he just could go over the top, had the softest hands, and he would just catch a touchdown. It was just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And I'm sure you can think of a couple guys in Minnesota history that are just receivers that are held to that regard as well.
Yep.
Always a threat to stretch the field. Super humble. Let his game speak for itself, and it did speak a lot. And hands down, the best Redskins receiver of all time, and it's not even close. But just to do some research on our monk, it was a really special thing, and it was a lot of fun. Number 2, this guy for sure is deserving to be number 2 on the list. Darryl Green, an absolute kind of, as you'd say these days, a burner. He was just the fastest guy on the field. And there's a couple points in his career where you could tell he was the fastest guy. He had an insanely long career, 1983 to 2002, entirely with Washington. So 20 years. He played up until, I believe, 42 years old. And at a skill position like that, at corner, to still be able to keep up with the new guys on the outside, that speaks a lot. And I don't know if it'll ever be seen, a career with that longevity and a guy with that speed.
At age 42, he was probably still one of the fastest guys on the field when he stepped on
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
No, and it was super, super cool to watch some videos, and widely regarded as the fastest guy to play in the NFL at the time. Scary speed that was unmatched. 2008, he was a Hall of Famer, so in the same class as, I believe, Art Monk. So they both went into the Hall of Fame in the same year. I could be wrong, but I know one other guy on the list was at 2008. So they both made it to the Hall of Fame in the same year. So that's pretty cool too. 2 Redskins at the same time.
Yeah.
He's the Redskins' all-time interception leader with 54 interceptions. Next closest guy is 36. So that's a pretty safe record that I think he'll hold for a good amount of time. He had 12 seasons with more than 3 interceptions and 3 5-interception seasons in total. So that was pretty cool as well. He was not the kind of talker that Deion Sanders was, but they had a head-to-head rivalry who was the best corner. And they still argue it to this day. I actually saw an interview from a couple weeks ago, and they were going back and forth who's better. And none of them would budge as we'd know from both of them. So he famously ran down Tony Dorsett in his rookie season, in Darryl Green's rookie season. Dorsett is regarded as one of the best running backs of all time as well. Ran him down on the outside, made up tons of space to catch him, and saved what would have been a touchdown. And also, of course, I'd love that play because that was against the Cowboys as well. So,
right.
Of course, can't complain about that. Famously, always played with a Tootsie Roll in his sock. And that was a pretty cool thing, too, because there was videos of him before the game. He'd say, this is my secret weapon, this extra large Tootsie Roll that he'd keep in his sock. So that was kind of cool, too. And the cool thing is he's still involved with the Redskins and the NFL. He was actually at the Pro Bowl, and there was some skills competitions where he was kind of just coaching them around. But a lot of current players also regard him as somebody they looked up to, and especially corners, guys who really worked as hard as they could to be the best that they could, and that was Darryl Green. That was the definition of him.
Nice.
And number 1, and then the face of the franchise. So number 1, I have to put Sean Taylor, a safety who left us too soon, and any Redskins fan, any football fan for that matter, recognized how special and how great he was with the time we had with him in the league. Everybody probably knows him for that Pro Bowl hit when everybody's in the Pro Bowl kind of slowly jaunting around, but he absolutely laid the hammer on a guy on the outside, and it put a huge smile on my face. And that was probably the first time I heard about Sean Taylor before formally becoming a Redskins fan there. So he was the fifth overall pick in the 2004 draft, played with the Redskins from 2004 to 2007. He was a first-team All-Pro in 2007 and a Pro Bowler in 2006 and 2007. Aside from football, he was the ultimate family guy. He loved his family, but he was also very much of an introverted guy from what it seemed like. He was to himself, but once you made it into his inner core of friends, there was no leaving, and you had his full support and full loyalty. And that showed with his love for the Redskins there. He had the ultimate work ethic that is hard to have been matched these days. There was some videos of him talking about how he would run along the highway, and his dad would be in the car behind him, driving and just pushing him as hard as he could to be great. And he got there for sure. So he entered Miami U as a running back, and there was a famous video of Clinton Portis saying, "Oh man, I have to go against this guy running back." But the coach quickly said, no, that's our new safety there. That guy's going to be playing safety for us. And was he ever a force at safety for Miami U? Just interceptions, hard hits. Some hits that may be penalized these days, but even though it wasn't even that long ago, but he hit guys hard, but he made his force known there. For lack of a better word, he had killer instincts, and he was an absolute ball hawk, as I mentioned. Just kind of knew where to be, and could also make up ground to make that tackle, even if he was on the other side of the field there. So he his famous play, one of his famous plays was in a wild card game against Tampa Bay, where he had a fumble recovery touchdown in the wild card game, and that was kind of the days when Mike Alstott was playing as well. But so really not that long ago at all. But so he was just kind of a scoop and score, but then a couple plays later he was kicked out of the game for misconduct. But he still made his impact known, and just a special guy that will hold a close but sad part of a lot of Redskins players and NFL fans. But just a guy who is one of a kind. I know I've said that before, but just one of a kind there. And after he passed away, the Redskins, they honored him by only putting out 10 guys on the field. I think it was in November he had passed away, so the next following game, they only put out 10 guys on the next defensive possession. But just the crowd and the electricity in the air, you could feel he was there, and he's just greatly missed, and he's just a super guy, and that's why he's at number one on the my Redskins Mount Rushmore. And I'm sure you can think of who's the face of the franchise. It's not a player, but Joe Gibbs. Okay. Most definitely, Joe Gibbs is the face of the franchise. Redskins coach from 1981 to 1992, and again from 2004 to 2007. He was there for every single Redskins Super Bowl, and only coach in history to win a Super Bowl with three different coaches. Two-time Coach of the Year, Hall of Fame 1996. He was the most dedicated Redskins coach you'll ever see. I hope Ron Rivera can even who can scratch the surface on that. But a guy who would just he would stay in the building and just be totally dedicated to the team's success. And almost all the guys I mentioned on my list have Joe Gibbs to thank as being their coach or having an impact on their lives. He utilized the hard-nosed running style, but he also knew when to stretch the field and when the opportunities were there to score touchdowns, of course, and Art Monk was one of them. So it's awesome that he's still in the Redskins news. He often gives his opinion on certain things, and even as recently as Haskins, Dwayne Haskins, hopefully our franchise quarterback, who I strongly believe will be. He gives Haskins the seal of approval, and he does still do interviews and gives his insights. That kind of wraps it up, guys. Just a great group of guys that each one of them are special in their own way, but they're Redskins for life, and they're for sure on the Mount Rushmore, and they'll be in conversations for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
What's amazing about Joe Gibbs is I think he just got named to the NASCAR Hall of Fame this year, didn't he?
And he did, and that was kind of in between when he was coaching until 1992. In between that and when he came back in 2004, he was really involved in NASCAR as well. And from what I understand, he was a very integral part of NASCAR's history as well.
Yeah, I'm leaving football and I'm going to become a Hall of Famer in another sport.
Yeah.
That's just amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. And yeah, Joe Gibbs is just a class act. And I didn't even write him on my list because that's who I had in my head for my praise of the franchise. And I'm so glad you mentioned him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. That was a great job you did. And
Yeah.
I really enjoy the fact that you enjoyed looking at the history. You know, that's kind of what we enjoyed so much when we first started it. I have cards of teams that I never thought I would have because I'm like, oh, I got to have that card, you know?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And that's kind of just the love of sports card collecting is you do it for the love of it, and you can just take that card out of the box and just look at every once in a while and just think like, wow, that guy was great, and then watch some highlights or whatnot. So it's sports card collecting holds a close place to my heart, and I'm sure I know it holds a close place to your hearts as well.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, we really appreciate you coming on and doing this. I think we'll bring the episode to a close, but if you want to hang on the phone for just a minute afterwards, we'll talk for a quick minute, if you're good with that.
Absolutely.
All right, so that'll bring episode 84, Monday Mount Rushmore, the Washington Redskins, with Tim at Cough Cards on Instagram. Check him out. Great page, great guy. And yeah, that'll bring this episode to a close.
Skol Brothers out.